It's go time.
Welcome to Quick Kicks here on Third Down Gamble with your hosts, Don Charbin and Heath Graham, and special guest, Derek Taylor, voice of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on 680 CJOB.
Welcome back, everyone, to Third Down Gamble. Don Charbin, Heath Graham, and later in the program, we're going to have Derek Taylor, the voice of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on CJOB 680 in Winnipeg, who's going to give a much more deep dive than I think you and I combined can do into this free agency. One of the things, though, that we should discuss before we get Derek on the program, Heath, there's a little bit of confusion about agreed terms versus what's been happening today. Is there any way to simplify that sort of what that language means and how it plays out?
There is, and the short version is teams have a week in which to negotiate with any pending free agent. And that's where we saw a lot of these announcements over the last week or 9 days, I believe it was altogether, of players agreeing to terms with a team. It's not an official signing because today, as we record this, February 11th, is the end of that negotiation window. The team that the player originally played for still has an opportunity to sign that player, matching or beating the offer that they previously agreed to, or the player can then officially sign the contract with the new team. And that's what we're seeing today. So a lot of the news is transactions that we already knew, but this is the confirmation that they are now official.
The team, if they wanted to re-sign the player to match the offer that was received as an agreed to terms, they had 2 hours today, just before full-fledged free agency comes about. For those teams, they've seen what the offer is because it has to be reported to the CFLPA and to the CFL so that there's no sort of hidden messages going on, so that everybody knows what's going on throughout this communication window. I think it's a brilliant idea. This gives the team that had the players' rights one last chance to say, are we going to be able to match this? If we can, we really need this player. Let's do this. Or maybe up it just a little bit to say, we really want you here. Once that bell tolls and that 2 hours is over, which I believe is 11 Eastern, then full-fledged free agency is underway. And we saw a spate of agreed to terms become signed contracts.
We did, and I don't believe there were any that were matched by the team that were previously reported as an agreed to. There may have been some stuff behind the scenes that didn't get to that media release that somebody had agreed to, and then the team has re-signed. There were a couple of re-signings announced today as well. But the big thing today was the Edmonton Elks basically announced that they weren't going to make all of their signings official. There's been a lot of reports of players that have agreed to terms with the Elks. They were fast and furious in this process when that negotiation window opened, but they're going through their due diligence, making sure these players are able to pass the physical that's required before they officially announce. So there were a few players here and there that Edmonton did make official today, but I expect to see a lot more later on in the week.
And by the time this podcast drops, a lot of those names will come out through releases from the Elks and the CFL, and especially 3 Down Nation, who have done a masterful job with their live update, getting the word out. And my hat's off to everybody there who put in a lot of work this last week and a half to get this information out. They have become the number one go-to in terms of free agency, in terms of a lot of stories in the CFL.
They have, and there's not a lot of media outlets that do league-wide coverage of the CFL, but TSN and 3 Down Nation both have been doing a fantastic job of getting this information out to everybody and keeping up with the speed with which a lot of these things were announced.
TSN has done a remarkable job as well. It's something that I believe that their commitment to the CFL we can't argue with, and this is part and parcel of what they do. The Elks, it's interesting that you would go out on day one of communication window and agree to terms with so many players, and now there's sort of this little baiting game that goes on with the media. Well, we've got them, but we're not going to tell you what's going to happen yet. It's kind of fun that way, but they are doing due diligence because part of the agreed to terms is that you have to pass your physical. And
you do, and there's a lot of risk in signing players in free agency. especially if you don't know the full extent of what they went through last year. There's a lot of nagging injuries that can continue to flare up for football players, especially as they get a little bit older. A lot of battle wounds from a lot of games played, and you want to make sure you're getting the best version of the player that you're signing a contract with.
And there are free agents too that are coming off severe injuries, such as knee injuries that needed a lot of time to heal up. Is it strong enough? Is that repair strong enough to continue a football career? If it is, that's what the teams want to know. They still want you. They still want to see what you're about. But if there's something that trips us up, they have to have that out and say, look, we would love to, but right now you're not in shape. You're not ready to, and we don't want to cause any more harm.
Maybe the biggest, most recognizable name in that sort of situation is linebacker Adam Bighill. We know that the Bombers are not bringing him back. There was a tribute video posted today by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, but he's a player that has had 2 pretty severe leg injuries over the last 2 seasons, has indicated that he still wants to play. But I would imagine there's a lot of general managers that want to make sure that he's healthy before a contract offer goes his way.
And that's part of due diligence on behalf of the team. The player has to do it as well to see what the system is, the coaching is, what other players that they can work well in that new environment, what that would all mean to them. But beyond that, you want to know from the team's point of view that if I'm going to pay you, I want you to be available. Now, some teams will take a flyer and a risk anyway and say, we understand you've got this injury. We understand you're going to make a complete recovery. Let's just use the Lafranc injury that we saw a couple of years ago. And you could say, okay, Nathan Rourke, we still are going to hire you and bring you back, but we just will be patient with you so that you are completely healthy. And that's another way you could go about it. So there's a lot of nuance in this. There's a lot of particular, there's a lot of detail, but there's so much nuance. And that's why I think the way the CFL does it is so great, because you get that 9 days this year of communication. Everybody knows within the league what's going on. You got 2 hours as the team saying, oh, do we want to match that or not? And then if we don't, that player is free to sign.
Another big part of this equation also is that there's not a lot of guaranteed money in CFL contracts. So even though you're making these signings, there might be some signing bonus money coming the players' way. But until they get through training camp, we don't know that all of these signings are going to stick.
And that does happen too, where you see a really highly touted free agent signing never play it down. It does happen. It's very rare, but it does happen because the fit isn't right. Something else has come up. We just can't anticipate. We love to speculate right now and say who's won this, given everything that's moved. It's like you said in our last podcast. This is all on paper right now. They haven't played it down yet. And coming up is Derek Taylor.
Hey, it's Dave Thomas, voice of your Saskatchewan Roughriders, and you're listening to the Third Down Gamble podcast.
Derek Taylor now has joined the podcast. Derek, welcome back. And we know you're the guy that's got the in-depth knowledge of all this free agent shenanigans that's been going on. So let's talk about it. First, where do you want to start?
Man, so many moves today. Golly. Well, Edmonton's deals haven't gotten done yet. They've announced a couple of them, but they've been the team to watch, right? Just every big name body. And it feels like nobody knew about the salary cap increase except Edmonton, because they just started piling on these huge names of, well, here's Serezna and here's Tyrell Ford at all the money in the world. And, oh, Royce Metier is a good one. Let's bring him in. Let's get David Beard back. And just all these moves one after another. Edmonton is, I mean, they needed to. They're a team that's got to be on the rise. They in Calgary needed to make some moves, but Edmonton really went after it and looted a lot of teams of some of their prized possessions. So those deals aren't done, except for I think it's like 4 or 5 of them. They're certainly the one to watch for next season.
Well, the Elks have, I guess, physicals to get through and things like that, and then they'll be announcing a bunch more of those confirmations on Wednesday, which will be a day before this podcast comes out. The Elks, I kind of joked last week that they were trying to sign every free agent possible that was even out there. And for a while, they were doing that. They were first to this person, first to that one. I think on 3 Down Nation's top 30, they nabbed 8 of the top 15.
Yeah, which is the way to go, right? Like, it's been cold for so long in Edmonton. They're going with Trey Ford. I have some questions about how that's going to go. They're going to need to be strong in a lot of other areas. And they've clearly said, okay, well, on defense, 1, we're turning this thing over, and 2, we're going to be awesome. Some of that might be, hey, we're transitioning from what was a Chris Ford designed roster for defense to now we're moving on to a different defensive coordinator. So you bring in Ford and Ragamba and Metier and Kobe Williams, Brinkman and Serezna and Robbie Smith. You're going Canadian at one defensive end spot, as you previously announced, Jonathan Kongbo. Maybe there's some of the moves are to get to what the new DC wants versus what the old DC wants. I'm going to wonder about the receiving core when the season rolls around, because at the moment you're putting out Trey Ford with Keon Julian Grant and Curly Gittens Jr., Trey Odoms Dukes, and a bunch of rookie Canadians and rookie Americans and younger Canadians. And I don't know if you can run the ball enough to combat the fact that I have no bodies in these positions quite yet for the Edmonton Elks.
That Jake Serezna trade last year with Toronto looks pretty good, though. They retain Curly Gittens, and Serezna comes back.
Yeah, it seemed wacky at the time. I thought, why would you ever willingly get rid of Jake Serezna, a guy who was a world destroyer in the playoffs, and it was a terror for the Bombers this past season. So every time he would be on the field, I would start biting my nails in the radio booth. Yeah, they get him right back, and if you're going back to that 4-man front, yeah, you're set. You're set in that and especially the Canadian depth that they potentially have there on that defensive line. Edmonton's going to look defensively should look a lot better. It's going to be the other half that makes me wonder.
It almost felt like the way Ed Hervey went about this, that he was going to undo everything that Chris Jones had done. And you look at the big names that Jones had signed.
Yeah, Niles Morgan is back. They kept Nick Anderson. Anderson was going to explore the NFL. That's a real nice. That linebacking core is set. They they look like they're going to be just fine on that front if it all comes together.
Well, it was his priority. At his first presser, he said defense is going to be what we have to shore up. He went out after it. I really do think if the Elks can gel, they're going to make some noise, because that was the statement they were trying to make through free agency.
Well, because they scored a lot of touchdowns last year with McLeod Bethel Thompson, for his span of games, had Bo Levi Mitchell like numbers, right? It wasn't all coming together, and Trey Ford adds a different element. Props to them for identifying, hey, we need to be better here, but you can't totally sacrifice the other side of it there. And yeah, you're going to need to find somebody to kick the football too. But they let Boris Beatty go, and Jake Julian's off in the NFL. They get Cody Grayson to be the punter, which that's a solid move, and it takes away from Calgary, so that'll be even better for Edmonton. Unless they're going to a full-time run offense, which I am here for. I am absolutely here for. Run the ball all the time, second and long. We run the ball because we know we're going for it on third down. Bring it on. I would love to see Trey Ford and Javon Leake and Justin Rankin just kooking it up there. That'd be amazing.
Do you think they can pry David Cote or Jose Maltos away from Montreal to solve that kicking problem, or do they have to look at bringing somebody fresh in?
I think they probably will look to bring somebody fresh in. Cote, in points produced over expected, is one of the worst kickers in the CFL. I wouldn't. Campbell Fair's been a guy who's been in and around for them for a while. They bet big on Boris Beatty, and Beatty regressed to more like what he has been for his career. It just didn't work out. But I think worst case scenario, you can find them. Teams go American there too, and teams go global at kicker. So I don't think they'll have a particular problem finding somebody to fill that spot.
We mentioned Odoms Dukes coming from Calgary. The Stampeders gave a lot this time around. Their starting linebacking core is going to be brand new almost.
Yeah, Micah Tights +1 is kind of the way it looks like. If I presume Tights over Sopic, but that's probably a debate. It's going to be somebody else. And Calgary is so no team needed to improve more than Calgary did in this offseason. Damon Webb, yes, please. Derek Moncrief, sure. Trade for Fullerton Arimolade. I love Flo. He's awesome. I have 3 years left in he's going to be Defensive Player of the Year within 5 years bet, so that's good. Dominic Rhymes, Tevin Jones, big bodies to add in on offense. Rhymes was over 1,000 yards last season. To go with Bagleton. If they're healthy, like if Malik Henry is healthy after back-to-back season-ending injuries, and if Jalen Philpott is healthy, Calgary's got some receivers on offense for Vernon Adams, and that's nice. Dedrick Mills, Jeshrin Antwi to run the football. Counting on health, though, but I really thought Calgary would look more like Edmonton looks in free agency and go in to get guys. It just hasn't quite turned out to be that way.
That defensive line, who's left? Hauser's going to be probably gone.
Yep. Keelan Thomas and Josiah Coatney.
Mike Rose is gone, and you just go on and on. I know they want to overhaul it, but how far do you want to overhaul?
Oh, right. It looks like almost right down to the studs and hope for some younger guys. Because, Vauders is now in Winnipeg. Okay, well, you didn't want to pay Vauders his bonus. I don't particularly know why. I know Bomber fans are super happy that James Vauders is in Winnipeg now. But, trading for Flo, but you had to give up Cam Judge. Okay. Micah Away's now in BC. You could probably find a middle linebacker to do what Away had done. Adrian Green, they've added in. Green's a guy the Bombers... I just was going back over midseason Bombers-Lions games, and the Bombers were picking on Adrian Green in those. You go, okay, well, Canadian and fits with what you want to do at the one spot with Benjamin LaBrosse, who you took high in the draft last year. So I get it. They don't have a lot of, you can't be a 6-win team, a 4-win team again if you're the Calgary Stampeders. I really thought they'd be bigger movers in free agency, but they just have not been. 1,000-yard Dominic Rhymes is the big ad, and I like it. I just thought there should be more in addition to it.
And you look at what happened with Demario Houston, their big splash last year is in some legal trouble south of the border. We don't know what his status is going to be for this season. So that's another guy that they invested heavily in that might not be there for them.
Which that'd be big time, because you would have thought that boundary side was locked down between Houston and Damon Webb. And if one of those guys is gone, okay, well, now is Tyler Richardson going to take that spot? He played some reps for them. It didn't go real well for Tyler Richardson. They just brought Marleshon Franklin back from the European League, the former Edmonton Elk. Yeah, that one's going to sting. Demario Houston, but if he can't play, that's going to be a problem.
And field side, of course, Trey Roberson's probably not going to be there anymore.
Which is another one. You're going to have to go to young guys again, and 10 wins in 2 years. And Calgary was just, for me, Calgary was absolutely unwatchable for me the last couple of seasons. They go get Vernon Adams, go, okay, well, here you go. They're going to make a move. Whatever you think of Vernon Adams, he's better than what you had at quarterback, and he certainly provides more excitement and more options at quarterback. You have to fill in around him. How the Bombers, say, have attacked receiver in free agency with, okay, we let a super top-end guy go in Kenny Lawler, but we're going to fill in with Reggie White and Jareth Stearns. Okay, we're gonna have more options. Calgary kind of hasn't gone to there. If Malik Henry isn't healthy, okay, we have Tevin Jones, but can you keep everybody out of camp? I just don't want. It'd be hard to be a Calgary Stampeders fan right now going, what's our future if Flo doesn't get 18 sacks?
That's a great question.
And Vernon doesn't throw 40 touchdowns.
Well, that's the thing. Is Calgary hoping to win 40-39 every night?
I thought there'd be more.
Now, you mentioned the Blue Bombers. They made some moves. They had to, because some of their players did find employment elsewhere. James Vauders, that surprised me, because he actually left the NFL to come back to the Stampeders, and now he's a Blue Bomber.
Yeah, and he was a force in that 23 season with Calgary. He only played, I think it was 6 games, but had 5 sacks. And Bomber fans remember well, he took the Bombers tackles to school in the one game in Winnipeg. He then follows it up with 5 sacks last year, which 5 in 18 games isn't a huge number. No one had any sacks last year. The league leader had 8, for crying out loud. Last year was a weird year, but as the Bombers, if they keep wanting to run this 3-man pressure, like these 3-man fronts, they got very specialized last year. And okay, this is our 3 defensive tackle alignment. This is 3 defensive tackles and Willie Jefferson. Here's 2 tackles and 2 ends, including Willie Jefferson. Here's 3 defensive ends. Here's a 4th guy who's a stand-up defensive end. Let's run it that way. If they want to get pressure with 3 guys, you had to go get a defensive end to fill the role that Jackson Jeffcoat was a couple of years ago. So when they made a deal with James Vauders, I was, 1, quite surprised they were able to pull that off, and 2, I was deliriously happy, because when it's a passing down, you want to go Vauders and Jefferson on the end with Jamal Woods in the middle, absolutely moving bodies. Good. Yep. Drop 9 all you like, because those 3, they're going to have a better chance of getting home. It wasn't a problem that they had half as many sacks in 24 as they did in 23. It wasn't a problem because they were still the number 1 defense. But we all like more sacks, and more sacks would be a good thing. And more quarterback pressures mean more mistakes, means more turnovers. Yeah, of the 10 moves I think the Bombers have made so far. That's, to me, that's number one, and there's 3 really good moves from the Bombers so far.
And keeping with the defensive line, old reliable Jake Thomas is back for one more run at it.
He never misses a game. He never misses a game. He doesn't miss snaps. Like, Jake doesn't miss time. And they have real good depth. Last year, Cam Lawson getting injured very early on gave Tanner Schmeckel a chance to see a lot of action. The way they talk about Kyle Sampson, who they took in the second round last year, you go, wow, that's 4 guys, Canadian defensive tackles, that they are fans of. If Cam Lawson comes back, that guy feels like he should be the Bombers starter for the 8 seasons after Jake Thomas decides to retire. The Bombers look real good in that spot, and that's one of the keys for a team that runs 8 and 9 and 10, I think 10 Canadians at least at one game last season. They get flexibility from having guys like that. So yeah, I love Jake Thomas. He just does his job. Some guy fouls him and he just keeps rolling. I love him. I love Jake Thomas so much, and so glad he's back. Not all the fans think Jake Thomas is the greatest player in the world. Not all fans think that Jake Thomas should keep playing CFL football. I think Jake Thomas is effective in that inside, and I'm glad that he's back for the Bombers.
I'm with you on that one. I'm a big Jake Thomas fan. He's not the fastest guy. He's not the biggest guy, but he fills a role out there and he does it consistently.
Oh, when he decides a center needs to be moved, that center moves. Willie's the star of that defense, right? Willie, watching him, like that game Willie Jefferson had in the Grey Cup might be the best game a defensive player played all season long. It would be testing my memory to try to actually confirm that. But man, Willie was a monster. And just watching him, again, I was watching those 2 games with BC in the middle of the season. He was just savaging both their tackles left and right. And okay, this is really good for a guy in his early 30s. Put that all together, how Jamal Woods popped last season toward the end of the season. Devin Adams had some moments, I think ended up with 4 sacks. You go, okay, they're not a team that spends on the interior apart from keeping their Canadians going. They'll just rotate in a new American defensive tackle. That front should be able to do whatever their defensive coordinator wants to do.
Behind them, they have lost Terrell Ford to Edmonton, and they're not going to re-up with Adam Bighill.
Yeah.
And I wonder, losing Bighill, not only a commander on the field, but what do they lose in the locker room?
Well, and that's the thing. And if they don't resign Brandon Alexander behind him, that's an extra layer to that. And that's the thing that, as an outsider, we'll never really know. But Bighill, I don't imagine there's anything that can happen on the field that Bighill hasn't seen before and can figure out what to do with. That's big. They re-upped Tony Jones for 2 years, and I think as Bomber fans, when we saw Tony Jones come along last year, you went, okay, well, that guy now 30, that guy's the future at middle linebacker. We feel okay with that. Bigill's coming off an ACL, right? Like that Labor Day game, he popped his knee and he's rehabbing, but where's he going to be when the season starts? What's he going to want salary-wise? You kind of see how the Bombers got to that decision, which had to be brutally tough. Like it's show business and not show friends, but getting rid of Adam Bighill, who's been so important to the franchise from 2018 to 2024 in this era, had to be a big one. You had to go at some point. So yeah, the impacts of who are going to be the guys in the locker room, like it'll always be Willie Jefferson, but is that Tony Jones style? Okay, well, I wonder. It's who else might be? It's not Dietrich Nichols style. Evan Holmes a little quieter. Jamal Parker the same way. There's a lot of guys who are quieter. Do you need the first ballot Hall of Famer on that? Like Bigill's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Do you need a first ballot Hall of Famer on that defense? I guess we'll all kind of see how the Bombers defense does and then try to figure out what we believe about losing Bighill. But it's a huge change for sure.
My way to give hope to Winnipeg Blue Bomber fans, though, is a lot of us were upset when Andrew Harris moved on to the Toronto Argonauts and they didn't re-sign him. But we had a guy named Brady Oliveira that jumped in behind him and has done a pretty good job. Don't fear about losing Bighill.
Yeah, running back. I've made my stance on running backs quite apparent over the years and their replaceability. I do think they're well covered. Like in all these spots where the Bombers are losing guys, they lose Tyrell Ford to Edmonton. They had Jamal Parker ready to start at boundary corner going into last season. He gets hurt on the third day of camp. So you go in thinking, okay, well, it's Terrell Bonds and Jamal Parker. Okay, well, they're set for their back six. We'll figure out who's the safety. They're set at 5 of their back 6 positions, wherever they want to go. And if they want to stay American at one of them, if they don't bring back Alexander, they want to plop Michael Griffin in there. Well, he was the 7th for most of last season. So they lose guys, but they at least have replacements that make sense and replacements that I think are going to be good.
Drew Wolatarski and Kenny Lawler are two that I thought would hurt them. Lawler, because he could take the lid off defenses. Drew Wolatarski seemed to be the guy that if you needed a clutch catch, he was always going to get it for you.
Yeah, that's the one I wanted Kenny Lawler back like I want my next breath, or my next Slurpee might be a better way to say it. But I guess I get it. I wanted Drew Wolatarski back because when you need 10 yards, Drew Wolatarski found Zach 10 yards. And another guy where he and Zach seem to see the game exactly the same way. Need a first down? Here you go. You need me to break my ribs to make this play? I'm going to go ahead and do that too. Like I was very surprised that Wally, who was his bomber from day one, taken in the supplemental draft. I'm surprised at how that went because they weren't then loaded with Canadian depth. And when you think Wally's salary couldn't have been too much, or his salary expectations for 25 couldn't have been otherworldly. You want to get Kevin Clercius more reps? I see it. That guy's got some real potential and can do a lot of stuff in this offense. That was the one I was surprised about. Another one of those guys that, when you talk about what happens in the locker room, that's another guy that I feel like guys love Drew Wolatarski. And there's probably a reason that the Bombers' former assistant GM, who's now the GM in Hamilton, immediately signed up Drew Wolatarski.
Saskatchewan Roughriders. Last year you described them as having heat. There was heat around this team.
Yeah.
Going into year 2 of the Corey Mace era and free agency, what do you think they did? They did a lot of extending, but they did give up a few. Peter Godber is one that I thought would really make a change up front.
Yeah, they have a bunch of depth Canadian-wise on the interior, so I think they're going to be fine. And for a spell last year, they went 3 Americans along the way. Critical injury problems probably led to Brammer kicking inside, but like Logan Ferland, an absolute monster year. They just signed up Philippe Gagnon on Tuesday. Noah Zur, Zach Fry, guys who have had time. Jamarcus Hardrick will be healthy again at that right tackle spot. That's pretty good because, I mean, they went out in 24 and got the best tackle available in free agency in Jamarcus Hardrick. So now he comes back in. Brammer's got some experience. Trevon Tate has some experience. They've got guys on that offensive line. They add in Tavon Campbell back from the NFL. They bring a Saskatchewan guy in, and you go, oh, okay, between him and Onyeka and whoever else you want to put out there, one of those defensive back spots is going to be Canadian. Yeah, you're good. And then that front, Mike Rose and Micah Johnson paired together in that defensive front. Come on, man. I was between us. I was texting with some guys in Sask, and I'm like, I feel like the West Final. Is going to be Winnipeg and Sask again. And my buddy texted back, yeah, but I think it's going to be in Regina this time. I go, if Sean Bain is healthy and Trevor Harris is healthy for a long spell of games, that is not out of the realm of possibility. It's Saskatchewan really. I mean, this roster, health is everything. This roster is really good.
They gave up on Shea Patterson, though. He's Winnipeg bound.
Yeah, and he joins 4 other quarterbacks in Saskatchewan's roster. He was a guy that folks were raving about to me, his camp in 24, but Trevor Harris, Jake Mayer, Tommy Stevens as your short yardage quarterback, who's literally been the most effective short yardage quarterback in his time in the CFL. And then Jack Cohn, who they got to look at late last season. I don't know what Jack Cohn's future is. They do let Shea go, but Mark Mueller had a year to look at him and went, okay, we can get Jake Mayer. Oh, and we can have a short yardage option. Oh, okay. Mayer is a backup. Is that going to be the best quarterback room in the CFL? Maybe Toronto is a fraction better with Dukes and Arbuckle, the Grey Cup MVP, but Sask, receiving core, good. Offensive line, good. Defensive line, good. Jameer Thurman, I love. It's going to take me 3 months to figure this out, but this might be the best starting roster in the CFL right now.
Well, it's interesting you talk about the quarterback room, but 2/3 of that room, let's say Cohn doesn't make it, was in Calgary last year.
Yeah.
And what did they do?
Well, they had to start Jake Mayer, right? And I forget how long ago it was I kind of punted on Jake Mayer and me believing that he was going to be a big time starting quarterback in the CFL as a number 2 option in a league where some teams have to go to literally first year American kids as their number 2 option. Jake Mayer is a tremendous option at number 2. To me, if somehow Harris plays 20 games this year, Saskatchewan is in the mix for everything. Health is always the story. It bit them last year, and you saw the significant drop off from 1 to 2 to 3 in Saskatchewan with starting quarterbacks last season. So much is Harris healthy, and if not, what can Mark Mueller do with Jake Mayer if Mayer has to start a significant number of games? They know each other from Calgary. All these things are such nice fits that Calgary has put there. Pardon me, I say Calgary because they're all from Calgary. That Saskatchewan under Corey Mace has put together. I wanted to cry when I saw they signed Mike Rose because the Bombers have to play them like 5 times this year. I don't want to see that, just stampeding up the middle and trying to hurt Zach Collaros and Brady Oliveira.
Nathan Rourke and Jeremiah Mazzoli might be a pretty good 1-2 punch for the BC Lions at quarterback this season as well.
Yeah, for sure. Curious. One of those guys probably has to do short yardage, which would be the one where I go, it might not be as good as Toronto or Sass, but yeah, that Mazzoli signing in Vancouver is nice.
I think that really helps Nathan Rourke out, to be honest. I think he's a guy that, although he's had some brilliant stretches in the CFL, still needs a little bit of that guidance, and Mazzoli might be a really good fit for that.
Yeah, and it's not a spot where last season it didn't feel like they addressed the, hey, how do we handle this? Because we have 2 number 1s, right? It was Nathan coming in to take Vernon Adams' spot at a point where Vernon Adams was, when he got injured, the front runner for most outstanding player. Granted, it was only halfway through the season. This year, that seems very strictly defined, right? For Buck Pierce and company. Nathan is 1, Mazzoli is 2. He can get us out of some games. If he's healthy, he can make some plays. And then whoever we choose to do the number 3 duties, maybe we try to groom a guy or whatever it might be. But I think maybe the definition and the organizational understanding of this is how it will go for our quarterbacks this year could be nice for the Lions.
It's interesting, though, the Lions for the second year in a row seem to have dumped salary in their defensive secondary. Last year it was Marcus Sales, who winds up in Saskatchewan. This year it's TJ Lee.
Yeah, Lee's moving on. They bring in Deontay Williams, who had some downs and ups in Saskatchewan. That guy brings a load. So wherever they find a spot to put him, can he play inside at half when he's been a corner? Because you're not taking Gary Peters' spot. Could Jalen Edwards-Cooper move in? Whatever they're going to do. Yeah, TJ Lee had some struggles last season. It was not what we've come to know TJ Lee to be. So that they move on, not entirely surprising for me from Vancouver. Going Canadian at defensive end, I like the thought of that. Matthew Betts gets a full season. That's 18 sacks 2 years ago before he went to the NFL. That works pretty well when they add in Dwayne Hendricks as well, a guy who was a hotly pursued free agent in advance of 24. Okay, well that's pretty good. That's something for Mike Benavides to work with.
They got Nathan Cherry re-signed as well. Maybe It's his turn to come out. Interestingly, in that offensive line, Suk Chung, 11 years, out the door.
I've never been a Suk Chung guy. I always just felt like better in the run game than the passing game. Obviously, BC disagreed for years because they paid him significant money as the hometown guy, and it held down that right guard spot for a long time. They traded for Dejon Allen to be that right tackle in a league where there are not a lot of great tackles. I thought it cost them what, Ryder Varga. So that's a significant price to pay, but that was a solid move in a league where we're not overwhelmed with great tackles. I thought that was a real good move. They were kind of the first team that went 3 Americans. They could stick with that. They could bring in one of the younger guys to be that right guard spot. It certainly would save them some money over what Suk Chung would have been commanding as a salary the last few seasons. So I understand that one. Just I'm praying for the first team that goes 3 Americans full time on the offensive line. Bring it to me, because there are so many Canadians that can contribute at other spots. You can fudge the salary cap by paying a guy 70 instead of 170. Part of me hopes that BC is the team that just jumps into it full time here.
Well, let's move east and let's talk about the Grey Cup champions, Toronto Argonauts. They've taken a huge hit this year.
As always, right? Every team wants all the vultures come out and pick the bones of the teams that went deep in the playoffs. They get Kadeem Carey back. That was nice. Add him to Kevin Brown, who they previously got released by Edmonton. You go, okay, well, the running back thing is solved. Chad Kelly presumably can play the full season, they would hope. Okay, well, your quarterback is set. The Anthony Lanier move, Anthony's a monster when he's healthy and playing. That's good. But yeah, I mean, the trade that got them Cam Judge, so they're setting the linebacking core with McManus and Judge. But yeah, now it's going to be filling in spots, right? Tavares McFadden did some stuff on the back end. They bring in Darius Bratton and Will Sunderland. Okay, well, we have to reload. I didn't think they were overwhelmed with great receivers last year, but they were good enough to win the Grey Cup. So well, I know, and that's kind of where they are for me. Once again, the thing for Toronto is roster, like player wise. Just looking at this, I look at this and go, are they going to go 5 Canadians on the offensive line? Because with Hunter and Dockstader, I don't know who plays right tackle in that mix. All the pictures I see of Dockstader are left tackle, but could they legitimately go 5 Canadians on the offensive line? Because I'm here for that. If you got the talent to do it, let's get after it and let's go. It'd be incredible. But I mean, they have Kelly and Chad Kelly. You like him, you don't like him. You certainly don't like some of the things that he's done and been, and we won't go too far down the road of. Kelly can quarterback in this league, and Kelly can do a lot of stuff. So when you have that, you're in a pretty good spot to start with.
They've got themselves the best return man in the game back. A little bit different than what happened in Winnipeg, where he was often a last-minute re-signing.
Yes.
They've been 2 weeks in now to re-upping Janarian Grant for another year.
Yeah, I was really this fast. Okay, well, something's happening there. At least the Bombers got Peyton Logan, and as Bomber fans, we can stop yapping about that for a season because Logan's a good one. But yeah, Janarian Grant, oh, he's good. He's very good. So yeah, Toronto just has to do what it did 2 years prior and the year before. When you're really good, teams are going to come get your guys. When you win 16 games, teams are going to come get your guys, and you just got to start back at 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and then get after it again. That East is the better division. Hamilton looks good. Ottawa should be good. Montreal, I don't know why. I mean, Montreal, if Davis Alexander is what they hope he is, they sign him to a 3-year deal. That East is going to be good.
Oh, it's going to be a dogfight. I'm curious about the Argonauts' defensive line. They gave up a lot this time around. You look at Jared Brinkman, who's no longer there. Woody Barron is probably not going to be there, although he got spot duty.
Yeah.
But of course, Jake Seresna has gone back home. I've heard that the Argos have tremendous depth along that defensive line. I guess we're going to find out.
Well, yeah, you'd better, because you lost a guy to the NFL, you traded one to Calgary, and you're losing one to Edmonton. And these are star players. So yeah, Haba, Lanier, Jordan Williams, Derek Parrish, whoever's going to start in that mix. There's a bunch of other guys in the mix too. Toronto's got some work to do. It's every team you get to reload. Congratulations on your Grey Cup. Now all your guys are too expensive. So yeah.
That's the joys of winning.
Yep.
We mentioned Ottawa. It's sort of our enigma team because we never know. We always think they're going to be better than what they are. Last year they finally were. It seemed to me like Ottawa was filling out the roster. They didn't go big on anything. They just wanted to make sure what they had and shore up a couple places. They're pretty content there.
Yeah, they are. They had Standback for this year. And I mean, that receiving core, if they're healthy, like Pimpleton, Hardy, Addison, Geno Lewis, and Nick Mardner, their first round pick from last year, that's guys that is severe receiving weapons who are all a little different, and it can all give you a lot of stuff, right? Standback had a great season in BC as a running back. Devontae Williams should be back from injury. Devontae Dedman, the returner, you can do some stuff on offense with him. Tommy Condell's got options around Drew Brown. So I mean that is probably as diverse a receiving core as we have in the Canadian Football League right now. They get back, apart from Webb, they get back very important pieces on that defense. They'll have to fill in some spots in the back six, but Carter and Malden and Wakefield and the company are back. Like Ottawa, I don't know who I'm going to pick to win the East this year because Hamilton's done its work too. Like it's going to be tough out there.
I was a bit surprised to see the retirement of Jalen Ackland. We talked about that receiving core, and he's one of those more dependable second down conversion guys. It looks like they've got a lot of options, even with him hanging them up.
Yeah, they'll have to bring in some younger guys as well. But I mean, Pimpleton emerging as this incredible threat. Like he and Mackay Polk were kind of the first year receivers that made you go, holy cow. People out of training camp were talking about, well, this Pimpleton guy's amazing, but how do they get him on the roster? Couple injuries, and then he just starts ripping things apart. Justin Hardy's 1,000 yards, and Braylon Addison, when he's healthy, he was a starting running back late in the season because he can do it. What the heck? We need to find a way to get these guys on there. They feel like they're in a really good spot. It's just going to be 2 games against Hamilton. Okay, well, now 2 against Toronto. Okay, well, now these are hard games against Montreal. How are they going to go? Brown's probably the 3rd best quarterback in the East behind Bo and Chad Kelly in whatever order you want to. There's no reason to think they can't. At this moment, there's no reason why I don't think they can contend.
The Hamilton Tiger Cats, we briefly touched upon them. Kind of a mixed bag. I thought they let go a few veterans that maybe they could have hung on to, but beyond that, like Richard Leonard, why is he still out there? I don't get this. He's a type of guy that can do anything on the defense for you.
Yeah, I think bringing in Stubblefield is a good one. They get Moxie back, Jamal Peters on that boundary corner spot. I guess they felt they're okay in that front. I don't know what they're doing. I assume they're Canadian at middle linebacker, or are they a team that tries to make Adam Bighill keep playing? Their receiving core, it's filled now with former Bombers, but you add Kenny Lawler into Shamar Bridges and Tim White, and Desmond Patman showed some stuff when he got a chance to play. Shamar Bridges was the rookie of the year. Was he the rookie of the year officially, or just he got my vote because he was so good before he got hurt? Tim White, Greg Bell was a revelation at running back. He took James Butler's job and never gave it back. Bo had a season. Okay, yeah, that's Hamilton's the team on the. Hamilton's the team. I'm checking their preseason odds to win the Grey Cup. Not that I think they're going to be the favorite in the West or anything, but at like 17-1, those odds are a little longer than they should be for the talent that they're putting on the field.
It's almost like it's going to be a race to 10 wins in the East to get first place.
At the moment, it does feel like that for sure.
New GM Ted Gavea obviously had some guys in Winnipeg that he liked because he's bringing a handful of them to Hamilton with him.
Lawler and Wolotarski, Liam Dobson deal got done. Brian Cole's a guy that Bomber fans liked a lot in a kind of a linebacker, can be a defensive back spot. Yeah, it's very clear if you just wanted to draw a line, like, where did the GM come from? He came from Winnipeg? Oh, okay. Yeah, these might well be his guys that he brought with them. And to spend the money to get Kenny Lawler in a time where you weren't sure what the cap was going to be, to pay whatever the number was, $275 for Lawler.
I'm expecting big things from the Tiger Cats. I honestly think that they were on the verge last year of getting some stuff done. Had Bo started the way he finished, they would have been really a concern in the East.
Yeah, so we'll see what Bo after a few down seasons. The second half of the season was fantastic last year. We'll see what he has for 2025.
Anything else, Heath? Okay, we'll let you go. We're holding you way past your bedtime there, Derek.
Appreciate you guys having me.
Just finally, where can people find and follow you on the socials?
Yeah, at DT on OB on Twitter and Blue Sky as well. As the season rolls along, my wife keeps telling me Instagram, so I got to figure that one out. So maybe DT on CJOB there on Instagram. But yeah, plenty more. I spent the last week or so just getting ready for free agency and adjusting my rosters and looking back at tape. So it can't be May fast enough for me.
Once this all shakes out, we'll get you back on for the season predictions.
Love it. I nailed it last year, so hopefully 2 in a row. I had everything kind of hit right last year. Hopefully 2 in a row.
We're working for a DT squared. We're trying to get Dave Thomas on with you.
Hey, there you go. I love it.
Thanks.
Take care.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble Podcast. Audio worth watching.